Finding your main in Granblue Fantasy Relink is gonna be like ordering food at a really nice restaurant. Everything is gonna be high quality, but the menu is gonna be vastly different. You need to order the right thing that you like for your palate to properly appreciate that restaurant. With that in mind, we're gonna break down each of the characters' playstyle based on what we've been shown so far, and I'm also gonna sprinkle in some footage from other Granblue Fantasy games for you to have more context of that character's playstyle. Now, this video is coming out prior to the game's release, so use this as a general guide and not a Bible, but make sure to subscribe because when the game does drop, I'll be doing in-depth guides for each of these characters to get you situated. That being said, drop the video a like, let's see if we can get it to 50 likes, and let's get into the first character breakdown. It only makes sense to start with the main character, Gran/Zeta. Their playstyle is going to be a reliable leader who excels at close range with one-handed swords and can learn a variety of skills to fill the gap in your party setup. Now, these two characters can be played interchangeably, so if you feel like being a man one day, you can. You feel like being a woman another day, you can do that and switch between the two. But they're gonna be your Swiss Army knife for your party in multiplayer or story mode content. Another fan favorite that's gonna make an appearance in Granblue Fantasy Relink is gonna be Catalina. Now, she's a skilled swordsman, and she also boasts healing and protective skills. She can call on a primal beast to temporarily enhance her attacks, so here you can see the primal beast kind of mimicking all of Catalina's actions, but this isn't something that you can expect to be permanent. This is only going to be for a set amount of time while that primal beast is summoned, and then when it's not there, you're going to have your normal attacks that are going to be uprange, close, what you expect from a swordsman. After Catalina, we have Naraya, which is easily a top contender to be my main so far. I don't know if she's a fan favorite, but she's a fan favorite to me. And now she's gonna be a warrior who delivers captivating attacks as she switches between two stances. One stance is for speed and one stance is for range. In this stance, we see her perform a counter at a long range, teleport to the enemy, and switch stances. From this stance, we can see her do two short-ranged attacks, where the first one appears to be charged. In Granblue Fantasy Versus, she has two stances, one named Dawnfly and the other named Flutterfly. Now, in Granblue Fantasy Relink, she fights with a sword in one stance and a halberd in the other stance, and I'm not really sure how to correlate which weapon is associated with what stance. That's something we'll get further context on closer to the launch of the game. Next up, we have Persal, who's described as a lordly knight who fields flames and blades in equal measure. He can charge his strikes for increased firepower, and now in this clip you can see while charging his attacks, he is able to walk around and maneuver. It's not like charged attacks in other games where you have to sit in place and kind of get your timing perfectly right to make sure that the enemy is still there when you let off that attack. You are still able to be mobile. Now, I apologize if I'm powering through a lot of these characters. We just don't have a lot of detailed information on their playstyle. We just have a vague description of how they maneuver, and I'm also trying to analyze the trailer that they gave us with that description for more details. But as I mentioned earlier, I'm going to be doing in-depth guides on all of these characters. So when the game comes out and you're watching this, just click on the channel and likely it'll be there. But we're going to move on to the next character, Siegfried. He's gonna specialize in devastating attacks with his greatsword, and getting perfect timing results is going to increase the strength of his attacks. As Siegfried does his attack sequence, you can see him occasionally light up red. This is his perfect timing gimmick, I believe, and likely you're gonna have to click the attack and then hold it and release it once he's red for optimal damage. Next up, we have Lancelot, and he's gonna be described as an agile knight who specializes in evasion and overwhelming foes with his flurry of attacks from his dual blades. I can see this being a very popular class solely off his character design and playstyle. The dual wielding classes, similar to Kirito, always make people go crazy regardless if the character is viable or not, and I mean, that's how you should play the game. You play the characters that you enjoy the playstyle for, not necessarily who's quote unquote meta and who isn't. And so I really like his character design and the way that he plays, and this is definitely another contender to be my personal main. So far I have about 3 contenders, and once I get my hands on the game, I'm actually gonna decide, but I definitely see Lancelot being a really cool option to play with. Rosetta is up next, who's described as wielding thorns and dealing damage from a mid-range to keep her enemies at bay. She plants roses across the battlefield, which also will provide a variety of support effects for allies. So far, we've only seen Rosetta use her mid-range abilities to attack enemies from a distance and also detonate the roses for even more damage. Once we get the hands on the game, I can imagine her supportive skills being things such as buffs or heals to support allies who are in that close range fighting the enemies alongside her plants. And so vision a character like maybe Catalina or Gran, who are, swordsman characters who are up close and in the mix, fighting, like I said, next to those roses. I can see those also detonating to potentially give buffs. Following Rosetta, we have Fairy, who in my opinion is going to have a very similar playstyle to Rosetta, with maybe just a different skin on the ways that she attacks. And now they describe her as thrashing enemies from a mid-range with her whip. Fairy and her pet are also going to provide a variety of support effects to her allies. So you can easily see, after having both of these characters described one after the other, how they can be similar. And now looking at the footage that we have of her, I believe this revolving orb and her pets are going to be the distance allies need to be at to receive the buffs from her, and we see it constantly rotating around. Now this is speculation, but I can see that being how this gimmick for her would work. Now let's move into a few characters with guns. I mean, who doesn't like guns? So to start, we have Rockham, and he's gonna attack from a distance with his rifle and a pistol, but if an enemy gets close, he can change his position in the blink of an eye. He is one of 2 gun users currently announced for the game, and we didn't get much information on him in regards to more details of his playstyle aside from what they just described. And in the footage, we just see him shooting enemies and kind of comboing off of it. But the next gun user is going to be Eugene. We did get a little bit more information on how his gun gimmicks are going to work, but they describe him as the other gun user who specializes in precise firing from a distance. He can aim at a specific weak point for bigger damage, and this is how Eugene is going to differ from Rockham. It's unclear if you manually need to know where these weak points of the enemies are, or if this blue highlight here signifies a chance to hit a weak point after dealing a certain amount of damage. Now with Eugene, we've been able to see him actually aiming where he shoots at, but we didn't see that with Rockham, which makes me kind of wonder, is Rockham just gonna have to shoot in a specific vicinity and hit people, or is he actually gonna be able to aim? I feel like this might be common sense for Rockham to be able to aim as well, but I just wanted to note that they did highlight that with Eugene and show it, which they didn't do with Rockham. But that wraps up the 2 gun users that we have announced so far. And next we're gonna move into Io. I'm not really sure how to pronounce her name, but let's get into how they describe her. Io wields a variety of spells to support her allies and hinder enemies. Once she puts some distance between herself and her target, she can pump up some truly destructive damage. Here you can see her use an ability to stun the enemies long enough of a period for her to charge up a DPS based attack. Now we're getting more to the speculative side of things, but I can easily see this being one of the characters that can be built as a heavy hardcore support that's just going to be focused on non-stop CC to keep the enemies off of your allies. And based on this description, I can also see the viability of some builds where she's just going to be straight DPS, but she's going to be that long range distance mage that we haven't seen so far in the game, that's just going to sit back and charge up skills and dish out the damage. But all of that is going to vary based on the numbers that they actually do give her at the launch of the game, because yes, she can have all of these mage attacks and charge damage attacks, but if the modifiers don't compare to the other DPS units, it might not be as viable, and she may be stuck in that support role. Now we're going to move into a few of the beefier characters that play similar to Berserker and MMORPGs, or characters that take a lot of damage but can also sit there, tank it, and dish it out. And to open up this section, we're going to start with Vayne. He's described as a loyal knight who shrugs off enemy attacks with his grand halberd swings. He also protects his allies with formidable defensive skills. Now, in most games, this blue aura we see right here means that you're invincible or you have some type of super armor. And here we can see that it lasts throughout all of Vayne's attack. And this is a pretty long attack, which shows that he's able to have that super armor for long durations of time, similar to the way that they described him. Now, you will see this blue aura on a lot of skills in this video, but I felt like it was only relevant to bring up here in this section as we're getting to all of the characters who are tankier and absorbing damage. and it's going to kind of be integrated into their playstyle of tanking damage and dishing out damage with attacks. So within that vein, you get it, within that vein, but similar to Vayne, we have Vasiraga. I know I'm pronouncing that wrong, but he's described as a behemoth of a skyfarer who shrugs off his foes' attacks as he swings his massive scythe. The description sounds very similar to Vayne, and as expected, he's gonna play very similar as well. He excels at delivering massive damage even if it puts him in harm's way. So in this clip, as he's charging his armored attack, he's also flashing red when he's hit. Now this is speculative, but I wouldn't be surprised to see a gimmick where his attacks deal more damage based on the amount of DPS he takes while he's charging them, solely off the fact that they're actually highlighting each time that he's attacked by a trash mob as he's charging this ability. And on the final run of the tankier defensive characters, we have Zeta. She's described as a feisty spear wielder who punishes foes with her aerial combos. Perfect timing allows her to continue her assault all before delivering a powerful finishing blow. In this clip, we can see attacking her shield springs her into the air where she stays as she continues delivering those aerial combos. Unlike Siegfried, which we talked about earlier in the video, I don't see any mechanic to indicate her quote unquote perfect timing aside from this blue light, but I only see that with this one attack in the clips that they showed us. So I don't know if the perfect timing that they're describing is going to be more of like a understanding the game mechanics so that way you can plan it, or if there's going to be a built-in gimmick like Siegfried that you have to accommodate to continue attacking. But I do think this is a very unique way for a defensive character to play because of how much time she spends in the air. Most of the tanks that we see in different games are leveled, they're stationary, they're on the ground. And so I think this is a really cool spin on a tank. And I definitely can see this character being fun to give a try and probably going to be vital in a lot of the in-game content because she's kind of one of few tanks that we have announced in the game so far. But don't be surprised if they announce like a character who is specifically meant to tank and only tank, because like I said, we are going to have in-game content. Someone's going to have to keep the DPS off of everybody else. And so far, the characters that we have that are quote unquote tanky, Zeta's probably the best fit, but they've described nothing about her keeping aggro. They've really just described her having a shield and also dealing out damage with aerial combos. Next up, we have Ganoza, who is the latest character announced, and he's been described as a warrior who only trusts in the power of his fist. He excels at close range where he can strike with his raging fist to utterly crush his unlucky foes. We can see in the clip that he sits and performs a counter which knocks back his enemies, but he doesn't just immediately continue rushing to him to dish out more DPS. He sits there and continues to wait for them to attempt to engage again, where he dishes out more damage from an ability that doesn't look like a counter, but it does look like a charge move that he timed with when they were going to engage again. Next up, we have two characters of a specific archetype that I'm not a big fan of, and I don't really know what to call it. So if you guys know, drop it in the comments down below. But to start, we have Charlota. She's described as being skilled at hindering the enemy with rapid cuts and aerial attacks. She boldly flies into the fray to strike at her foes. Charlota's gonna jump around doing quick-paced attacks to get in and get out. Now this is speculation, but if you slow down this clip, you can see during her attack sequence, it looks like she stops for a few frames to perform a counter-like skill last minute, stopping the enemy from the air's attack. This adds more to me believing that she's going to be a very twitchy, fast-paced character with her quick playstyle and how reactionary that this counter was and how quick she was able to pivot into it from her attack sequence if this was in fact a counter. Now the last character of this archetype, we have Yod Dara, and he's described to slice his foes to shreds in an agile display of dual katana mastery, a speed demon of a character. From the description alone, this is a character, if my eyes were closed, that I could see myself loving because it just sounds so badass. But as soon as I open my eyes, I immediately don't want to play this character because I hate this character design, but I can see the potential to dish out a ton of damage. For those of you, if character design isn't something you really care about, I can see this character being really cool to play with. Just the skills alone look really badass. And another dual katana character similar to Lancelot, where it's just quick speed, quick damage, and that Corito mindset. He just doesn't look like Corito, so it's not it for me. Now, the last character we have is called Rolan, and Rolan, I believe, is a Granblue Fantasy exclusive character, and they've selectively decided to show us the playstyle of every character in a live stream except for him. So there's probably going to be more nuance to his playstyle, or maybe he's something that they want to save as like their big trump card closer to launch, but I haven't been able to find any information on him just yet. So that does though wrap up all the characters announced so far, but they are on record saying that they plan to announce a few more characters prior to launch. As I've stated several times in this video, I will be doing in-depth guides for each of these characters at launch, so don't forget to subscribe and drop a like on this video to show it some love. But now that you've chosen your main, you can check out this video here where I discuss why you should be excited for Granblue Fantasy Relink, discussing all of the highlights of the game announced so far. But thank you for your time. I'll catch you in the next one.